And we're continuing with channel surfing. A term we use a lot on this show, any show that talks about TV these days, we say the word showrunner a lot. And these two gentlemen, Ryan, Des, welcome. Thank you for coming to Channel Surfing.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us, yeah.
You just made a whole movie about showrunners. It happens to be called Showrunners.
I know, that's weird, isn't it?
It's very strange.
It's kind of an opaque title, but we'll roll with it anyway.
Okay.
I mean, our people, it's interesting because most of the people that would be listening to channel surfing, they know what that is. They know that term by now. And I'm kind of curious, you guys met and interviewed some of the biggest showrunners working today or that had worked in the past. J.J. Abrams, who's obviously moved on to other things, Joss Whedon. Do you find that in the culture most people know what it is, or is it still need to be sort of explained?
I think for a lot of people it does still need to be explained. I think a lot of people know the word, but I don't think they're quite sure exactly what the job entails.
I can't count the number of times where people say, "Oh, the people that get the coffee on the shows."
That's a little different.
And these are people in Los Angeles or like at a film festival. I'm like,
yeah. So somebody we actually described the documentary to at one point and said we're doing a documentary about showrunners, and they're like, "Why would anybody be interested in the people who get the coffee?"
Exactly. You'd be surprised. I mean, it doesn't happen often anymore, but once in a while.
Yeah.
I would watch a show called PAs, but that's a whole other story.
There could be a really interesting documentary. We should do that next.
All right.
But yeah, no, it certainly as a word is very much out there. Any article about TV, anything, it always now refers to the showrunner and mentions who the showrunner is. But like I say, I think there is still, I think people think that they're the guys who write the shows maybe, but maybe don't know everything else that's going on behind the scenes and why the job is actually kind of being branded the most difficult job in the entertainment industry,
That was one of the things that I noticed. I'm curious if, Eric, you noticed that too. Like, by the end of the documentary, I wasn't I think in my mind, I'd always fantasized that this was the best job you could possibly have because you have all this creative control and it's your baby. And so in my mind, I was like, if I could do anything, I would be a showrunner. And then I got done with the documentary and I was like, it does not look that fun. They really look like they want to die.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like Bill Preddy says, it's the best and the worst job at the same time. There's a fantastic opportunity to create a world, characters, tell a story, be in charge of that, have that kind of extended conversation with the culture, and have all those fans respond to you. Hopefully well. But on the flip side of that, you're probably working the most hours you've ever worked. The pressure is incredible on people. The budget, the editing, the delivery times, dealing with actors, scripts. I mean, I'm still kind of impressed that anyone can do it. I mean, we kind of say we have a newfound respect for even shows that we may not particularly like. I'll still take my hat off to the person who's running that show because they're doing one of the most terrifically difficult jobs there is.
He usually has a hat when he tells that.
Yes.
I can't wear the hat with him.
Well, even to say, we played Austin Film Festival last week and we premiered a North American premiere there, and Noah Hawley did our Q&A. And just to kind of go back to your point of it looks
who's the creator showrunner
of Fargo,
which
for
we
FX.
love around here.
Yeah, he's amazing. But he was also a writer on Bones for 2 seasons under Hart Hansen, who's one of the through lines of the documentary. And
even Janet Tamaro, who's in the film, who's a showrunner on right now, also started on Bones.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
people.
But just Noah just kind of looked at me and he's like, I could tell what season you were filming with Hart by the look in his eyes. Just to kind of give you an indication, he's like, that's definitely season 7. You were on with.
How did the idea to do the film come about? And then, of course, how do you get all these people to agree? Since given their schedules are so crazy and whatnot, you have such an impressive array of people in the film.
And then just really quickly that's a great question, but I just realized a failure on my part was to start off being like, showrunners, we all know what that is. Give a one-sentence description of what a showrunner is, and then answer Harry's question.
One sentence. Basically, the showrunner is the person who is in charge of all decisions, creative and logistical, on a TV show, and it's up to them to deliver it on time and on budget.
Okay.
If that makes sense to anybody. Where did it come from? When I was growing up, I'm from Dublin, Ireland. When I was growing up there, back in the day, there was constant kind of reruns of American TV because the local broadcasters couldn't really afford to produce a whole load of original programming. And I always preferred watching those shows to what we kind of got locally. There was more imagination, there was more action and adventure, everyone was beautiful, and there was tons of sunlight because we don't get a whole lot of that back in Ireland. And then as I kind of grew up, I was always interested in how things got made, films and movies. Anytime I bought a DVD, I'd always listen to the commentaries, always watch the behind-the-scenes stuff. And the mixture of those two things kind of coalesced over the kind of, starting in the 90s with Chris Carter and the X-Files, and then Joss and Buffy. I was really addicted to those shows. And in those days, the internet wasn't what it is now, so it would be more kind of print stuff that you'd be kind of reading, but there was very little of it still, even though those shows were quite popular. Yeah. So then the one that really changed it for me was when Lost came along, because I had never seen, I knew a little bit about showrunners and kind of what they did at that point in time, but I'd never seen showrunners pushed to the forefront in the way they had been on that show. You know, where the network is actually putting them out, fronting specials, trying to explain to the audience what's going on in the show because it's so complicated. The audience is needing a little bit of help. Yeah. To the point then where they end up on Late Night with Jimmy Kimmel and stuff like that. That was a real sea change, you know. Yeah. So that my fascination with Damon and Carlton was one of the main reasons I wanted to do the film, because I wanted to know more about them and the job that they did. And I told Damon that the other night at the TV Academy premiere. So. That was a nice moment.
It's really kind of staggering that for 80 years, you know, television has existed in some way, shape or form. It's all scripted. People write it, and a credit goes up on screen, and yet you know nothing about them until now, until the last 5 years, really, last 5-6 years. Now, you know, you go back and look at, like, say, Gene Roddenberry, Rod Serling. They were the forerunners of the modern day showrunner. They kind of said.
Although they, in their time, I feel like were maybe the exception to that rule, like somebody like a Rod Sterling, but was
who
sort
got
of
out in front.
Yeah, he was in front.
Well, he edited, he wrote, he directed, he presented. The show killed him. I mean, he died at like 53. You know,
again, not an easy job. It does not.
I mean, the smoking probably didn't help.
For sure.
Right, but I mean, it's a very
I mean, I think even through the 70s and 80s, there have always been names that I think you get. Quentin Martin with all those 70s shows, Cannon, Streets of San Francisco and stuff, and then the 80s like David E. Kelley and Stephen J. Cannell. But I don't think people really. They might have gotten a sense that a Stephen J. Cannell show is going to be kind of fun or action-based or whatever, but that was kind of it. Like, you know, now people are into the absolute minutiae of what the writers do, you know, and episodes are dissected online in fan forums. The live tweeting thing as well, I'm finding really interesting. That thing of, like, television becoming almost like theatre a little bit, and you know, for broadcast, I think that's becoming an important thing at the moment as well, to try and get eyeballs back to actually watching shows live as they're happening. But yeah, it's weird because the film took us 4 years to make, and I think that's kind of benefited us a little bit, because I don't think there's ever been more interest in them than there is maybe at this moment in time. You know?
Maybe we should wait to release it next year.
You know, it's funny now.
I have a lack of enthusiasm for that idea.
We're at a time, you know, I mean, obviously, you have all these TV shows that they're so beloved, and they go to Comic-Con and whatnot. But I've seen Comic-Con do panels with just the writers. You know, like I remember The Office did a writers panel.
Big Bang Theory.
Did it. Yeah, is that kind of amazing for you to see that? Yeah, these guys. Went from maybe you kind of recognize the names, and then like you're saying, the last few years now, people online especially, it's like they know exactly, and they interact with these people on Twitter and talk.
In the case of The Office, like, I mean, their cast, some of their cast are the writers, so it made sense. Some shows it doesn't really make sense to do that, but I've seen it happening more and more often, which is great. Like, and I think as this type of content ingestion like expands and people are more and more active, and I think a lot of it's the fascination with how things are made, and people making their own content and wanting to kind of emulate the model and take on their
I'm looking for someone to blame.
Possibly
things don't go the way they want them to.
I mean, the actors don't know what's going to happen the next season,
and they can control it. I mean, I think it's one moment that I also thought was sort of interesting was, I think it was on Bones when they were saying, you know, the first season the actors work for you.
It was Bones,
second season your partners.
The Boschko quote.
Third season you're working for them. So I think the actors do drive certain things, but not everything, certainly. And so, they are the kind of final say, and the person you want to go to as a fan. Why did you not ship the people I wanted to ship?
Oh yeah, that one. Yeah. So how did you? You know, I mean, obviously there are people that are going to be your go-tos, like you said. You know, Lindelof and Hughes and Abrams and Whedon. But you know, did you have this like master list of here's who we want to get in this film?
We just used the phone book.
I wish it was that easy. The Showrunner's phone book would have made life very easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. When I came over originally, I did have a list of about 10 people that I really wanted to get, and that was kind of devised between people who I thought were really interesting, people whose work I admired, and then also I wanted to try and cover a base between broadcast cable and premium cable shows and drama and comedy, because all of those things affect the way people run shows and the kind of jobs that they have to do. And I think in the finished film we have 8 of the 10 that were on the list, which is not bad going. And then obviously a whole bunch more people that we managed to get along the way.
Who were the other 2?
The 2 that we didn't get?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up.
Very sensitive about it. I appreciate that. Vince Gilligan and
Shonda Rhimes.
Oh.
yeah.
Yeah, I really, really wanted Shonda Rhimes in the film, but unfortunately she just didn't want to do it. So.
Vince was a different story. He agreed to do it, but the timing with the writers and being in LA and being in production in Albuquerque, we couldn't make the days work. Our directors in Dublin, I'm in LA,
Yeah.
we couldn't make the days work. So
That
and
is
they were in
one-
season 5 and asked getting in an hour, with them at that time was
Yeah,
insane.
it's also one of the drawbacks of being like ultra low budget indie doc is you don't always have the resources and time to do the things that you would really love to do. But we've done the best we can.
No, it's great. It's great. We've both seen it. I'm curious when you think about somebody like Abrams, who's become such an icon and such a star in his own right, and Joss Whedon now.
Yeah.
Certainly, the Avengers did not hurt. But do you see, because their styles are very different, but do you see a link between these people that you say that's the quality that makes them successful at this job? Is there any 1 or 2 things that you see as defining factors? Or
Good question.
Yeah, well, one, I think you have to have a great deal of talent as a writer. You need to be able to be a storyteller. But the second thing that you need to be able to do is sell your vision and be absolutely 100% clear with everyone that 1, you know exactly what it is that you're doing. 2, you know exactly how to tell the story that you want to tell. Because basically as a showrunner, especially in the early days, if you're starting up on a new show, you're just going to be surrounded by people who are questioning every decision that you make. And everyone's going to be trying to put their input in. That comes from actors, writers, studio, network, everybody. The early days are the hardest always. So you really, really need to be 100% sure. And you need to be able to sell it. And sometimes even if you are a little doubtful yourself, you still need to be able to go into the room and sell it. And some people do find that difficult and challenging, especially if it's a situation where you've been a writer basically for the whole time up to here. You're suddenly presented with a whole lot of things you've never had to deal with before. Budget meetings, notes meetings, casting, editing. It can be overwhelming for a lot of people, when they're, it's like being stranded in a sea of chaos. I remember Jane Espenson saying to us, like, when she took over at Caprica, there was like, she was just bombarded with hundreds of emails every day, and it was like trying to figure out, like, how do I rate the importance of these, and who do I respond to, and what do they want from me, and, there is no real training per se for that. I mean, the WGA have started this thing called the Showruners training program for the last couple of years, which is where senior level writers who have a shot at getting a show with a network can come in and go through a course where other experienced showrunners kind of guide them through. And that's been a fantastic development because the networks especially are crying out for really experienced showrunners. And if people have gone through that course, I think they're much more likely to have a shot at getting their own show these days,
Was it interesting for you that you're going to, like anything else, personalities are going to click and they won't click. So you have cases in this film. Was it Carnahan who done Dirt? He had a very different experience at FX than, say, Sutter had. So is it interesting for you when you sit down with these guys and get such different stories?
We actually had a really interesting thing happen with that situation in that John Landgraf had seen the digital trailer that Des, and actually Dennis had cut one of the first trailers. And he saw it and, I guess kind of tipped his head a bit and reached out to Matt and they kind of kissed and made up after.
Yeah, when we went back to film with Matt a little later on, he said that that was the first actual conversation they'd had since things had ended on Dirt and stuff. And I think the first thing John said to him was, should I be worried? Is there anything worse in here than what I'm seeing so far? But yeah, they did kind of come to terms a little bit over it, which is, so we feel good about.
Showrunners is mending fences.
Reconciliation.
A little bit, but it is.
Flash our number at the bottom of the screen.
But that experience is an example of where, showrunners do have a huge degree of authority on a show, but they are answerable to a network and a studio, the studio who's paying for the show and the network that's airing it. And if you do come to a creative difference, showrunners can be fired. You know,
Sure.
even if they created the show, they don't own the show.
Can and have been.
Yeah, you know.
I feel like there should be like some sort of like sub,
And
like,
then rehired.
some
Damn.
dark like Hollywood.
In certain cases,
Yes. In one miraculous case. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you try to get Harmon in the movie, by the way?
He already had a movie that was being worked on.
Ah,
Yes.
yeah.
Harmontown, so it was
Yeah.
didn't really.
He was already documentary.
Well, I ran into him in New York at New York Comic Con. We screened at the IFC Centre.
Yeah.
And he was really lovely, and he was outside signing stuff. And actually, a lot of the people who were there to see him came in and watched the film as well.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, I think we have a similar audience for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Community's audience is very. They know everything about that behind the scenes on that show.
The internet has changed. I just want to swing back a little bit before we talk about the internet to the idea, because Dirt was an interesting example, and we sort of touched on this earlier, but didn't really get into it, about the balance they have. You know, they're answerable to the networks, but talk about the balance too with the casting and the cast, and at what point that power play becomes really challenging. The film touches on it a little bit.
Yeah. There's a couple of things on that. Hart Hansen said to me, and I thought this was really interesting, that whenever he's starting on a new show, he will not allow actors to be a producer in the first season. And the reason for that is it's just too hard. When you're trying to develop a show at that initial stage, it really needs to be one voice. And if actors come in as producers at that stage, that kind of gives them some, leeway to kind of throw their weight around a little bit more. As things develop, as you just stated earlier on with the Bochco quote, it can become harder. I mean, that relationship between showrunner and actor, especially the lead actors, is absolutely key to a show being successful. If it's not working, the show's in trouble. And normally, as has happened, I mean, as an example, I think on Blue Bloods, I'm not quite sure how many showrunners Tom Selleck has helped, because Tom Selleck has a very particular strong vision for that show, and Tom Selleck is the star of that show, and people aren't going to watch it if he's not in it.
Right.
So he has a huge amount of control and power in that situation. So especially I think for maybe less experienced showrunners, I think that can be quite a tough situation to find yourself in, And I think possibly, there were a number of different reasons why Mike Kelly left Revenge as well, but there were certain issues maybe with some members of the cast there as well that were making life a little difficult for him,
Yeah, you always wonder, it's happened more and more in the past few years, I've noticed that, especially on these big cable shows where after the show becomes big, the lead actor gets a producer credit, and you always wonder, is that a good thing or is it, a weird thing,
I always find it more interesting when it doesn't happen.
Right?
Yeah, that is kind of interesting as well, because when it doesn't happen, it really means in some ways that the relationship is functioning as best it can. It's like,
Precisely.
you know what, I trust you.
Exactly.
It's okay. Although some people still want a vanity credit to
Sure.
a certain extent there or whatever. But a lot of actors, especially actors who've been in the business for a while, can make some interesting contributions. Like, I mean, most showrunners will always say, look, my door's open. If you've got an idea, come in and let's talk about it. But what they don't want happening is, okay, I'm going to shut the set down today. I want to rewrite right now.
Yeah.
It's too late in the process for that. That's just creating absolute chaos. So it's like they would prefer people to come in, have a conversation the day before, the week before, whatever it is. Or most people at the start of a new season, they'll bring the cast in and say, here's what we're thinking about doing. What do you think about it,
Again, the film, like LaPaglia, he cops to that fact.
Yeah.
Like, he would stop production and say, this is shit. and stop and do the rewrites right then and there, and halt production, and then you're going into overtime and costing lots, but to his credit, in many cases it made the episodes better and challenge the material. And
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's fair to
he's
say
got
that.
a massive theatre background. Like, he's not an uneducated or uninformed man by any stretch. He's
Yeah.
an amazing writer in his own right.
It's not fair to say that actors are always wrong in that situation either. I mean, they can have brilliant ideas to really help a show as well. But if it can be a symbiotic relationship, is much better for the show.
Yeah.
I think the challenge, though, is, and I think you're talking about this, it's one thing to say I need a rewrite because this isn't working artistically. It's another thing to be like, and I need to have all the lines,
Yeah.
and have it
entirely.
really be about vanity and sort of driving it down.
That when you get into situations like that, I think the politics of it become very tricky for a showrunner, and you do need to have a degree of very strong interpersonal skills to kind of make that situation work. Because the other thing that you don't want happening is the actors getting into a war between each other on set as well, because that just makes it a hugely unpleasant place to be. Kurt in the film as well mentions the fact that like he just won't tolerate bringing in anyone from the outside who has possibly a reputation for being difficult, because it's going to destroy the lovely kind of balance and family feel that he's set up on that show over the years. Like, so no matter how good their work may be, he's not interested if they're going to just come in and cause crap for him, like, you know. So yeah, if you can keep everybody reasonably happy. I think it's impossible to keep everybody happy all the time. I think every showrunner would acknowledge that. And in a way, they shouldn't be trying to do that either, because that's taking time and focus away from what they need to be doing as well. But if you can keep basically everything on as much of an even keel as possible, the show is going to just run much better.
You are releasing this. Obviously, it's a documentary. You're releasing it theatrically. I have two questions, because a very obvious thing when I finish the film, I'm like, this is great. I think it'd be also really interesting to have individual episodes following a show. Like, is that something that down the line? I want more. Is that something down the line that you would think about? Tell me about your plan.
Yeah, Des, tell us your plan.
Okay. Yes, there are a number of things. It's really interesting because in one way we've spent 4 years working on this and we're a little tired, but in another way, opportunities are presenting themselves to us at the moment that are very interesting, and we have a number of very good relationships with studios, networks, production companies, and showrunners in place at the moment. There definitely are other things that I would be interested in doing in this world of television. So if this film is successful, which hopefully it will be, there is a possibility that yes, there may be other things coming down the line. Yeah.
Well, we're on IGN, so I think we've already made it, right?
there you go. I'd like to believe.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
We mentioned that in the past few years, it's been this real rise of people knowing who these guys are, and that has been hand in hand, I think, with a lot of the rise of social media and what we were mentioning earlier, that a lot of these people are on Twitter and you can interact with them. How do you think that has affected them? Because it is that we've made some jokes, made the shipping joke, but it is that thing of like you're hearing these big heightened reactions, and it's a lot of it is that like I love everything or I hate everything. And
it's really okay. I liken it to driving, right? So it's really easy to be an arsehole when you're on the road because you're so insulated in your car. If you had to walk next to this person, you would never have done that. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just very much the same on Twitter or any kind of anonymous, where you can have anonymity and say whatever you want without any like fear of retribution or accountability whatsoever. So it's people are very quick to rush to judgment, and it's easy to paint a showrunner or a writer or an actor or whatever, any kind of celebrity as one or the other. It can be very binary and polarizing, without taking into consideration many other factors that go into the decision making and the creative process and the network and the studio. And there's so many. There's no one person who.
I mean, one of my greatest hopes actually for people after they watch the film is that they won't be so fast to push the hate button on Twitter. Yeah. It's an incredibly difficult job to do, and not everything that happens is necessarily the showrunner's fault. And even if you are disappointed with it, I hope after you see the film and realize how much work, love, effort, and blood, sweat, and tears has gone into it, that maybe you might just dial slightly back from the crucifixion kind of level of things that happen. It's one of those things that it's one of the reasons that some of the guys are reticent to go on there at the moment.
Or that Damon Lindelof
quit. Or that Damon left. Damon was literally hated off Twitter for making a piece of entertainment. Which I don't know what you guys think about the Lost finale. It seems to have split the fan base pretty much 50-50 as far as I can tell. But the finale is one part of 6 years of entertainment as well. I think people forget that a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, I never get the I wasted 6 years of my life. Yeah. Like if you were entertained along the way, how is that possible?
Exactly. And it's weird. In recent times as well, it shows the definition of success of a show seems to become much more about how it finishes.
Right.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like if the finale doesn't work, then the entire show is almost kind of written off, which I just find insane. Like,
do you think that's about maybe more because binge watching is so much more available?
Yeah, I think that is a big factor for sure. Like I think the Netflix thing has certainly changed the way people digest television and how much time they're spending.
Like Damon says, life is not episodic, life is serialized. So when you go on a journey for 6 years with these characters, like you're invested, you're watching these in real time, not in real time, but like on a week-to-week basis. If you're able to go in I guess this has now recently changed in the last few years. You can go in and watch all 6 seasons of Lost back to back. When we were watching it, we weren't able to do that. We had to invest all of that time. So if people are disappointed that, love and hate are not, they're kissing cousins. You've loved this thing for so long, and then it gets to the end and say you're not happy about how it ended because you hate it. If you express that sort of, disdain for it, it's probably because you loved it for so long, and then you're disappointed with how it ended.
Yeah, it's funny. Damon uses a really interesting metaphor with it, which is it's almost like a death in the family.
Precisely.
Because people have grown to love the characters so much, and so much for a huge amount of people that watch the show, there was like tons of time spent on the internet trying to figure everything out. Whatever.
That might be the last series where I think people actually watch in a serial arc in real time on those scale of numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't say I'll wait till
Until
later.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
check,
I mean, if you wanted to see it right then and there, I can't think of anything. Maybe POI. I don't know.
PO is a great show, but it doesn't really function in the same. Yeah, sorry, it doesn't really function in the same way. But yeah, I mean, I like. And I think for a long period afterward as well, every network was looking for the next Lost.
Yes.
The
I think
event.
finally that they
Flash
have
forward.
given up on
Flash
that
forward,
right.
because it's an impossible thing to replicate.
Yeah.
Like successes like that are a function of huge amounts of karma and good luck and timing and everything going on.
Tears of starving dolphins.
Where do you get that?
Pregnant mermaid flesh.
Was
That's what Damon said. I don't know.